Hey y'all, want to see how I turn these two t-shirts into a reversible corset? Then stay tuned. Okay, y'all, so this is my first time using a pattern. Normally when I sew, I take an old piece of clothing and place it on the fabric that I'm about to sew with and just outline from there. But this time I wanted to use a real pattern because I'm really trying to grow and be great at this sewing thing. I went and found a pattern on Etsy, and I found this store called Pattern Couture that sells patterns, and they have this really cute corset that I loved, and I'm like, let's try this pattern. Now, I'm not gonna lie, learning patterns is very overwhelming. That's partly the reason why I never paid attention to patterns. But what I liked about Pattern Couture's patterns is that they kind of make it easy for you to get the gist of how you should place everything. I like how it has this color grid that you could use to find your size on the pattern. For example, since I'm making a small corset, the line color is green, so I'm gonna go and cut on that green line when it's time for me to cut out my pieces of the pattern. Now, I mentioned at the beginning of this video that this is an upcycle. Initially, I was just going to make a corset out of this Aaliyah shirt, but as I go on, and you'll see it later on in the video, I realized that I did not have any lining material, so that's when I had the bright idea to make a reversible corset and use the TLC shirt. But right now, we're gonna just start with the Aaliyah shirt. So as you see in the video, I'm placing my cutout pattern pieces onto the shirt, trying to figure out exactly what part of the shirt I want to cut, and I want to make sure that I have Aaliyah's face on the corset, but I want to make sure that I'm cutting it right. So this is me just looking through the pages of the pattern and making sure that I'm understanding the directions. Now I'm going to show you clips of me cutting up the shirt. I'm making sure that I'm cutting off the sleeves first, and then I'm going to cut along the top so that I can, open the shirt up. And then I'm going to cut down the sides so I can make sure that I have the back piece off and then just have the front piece of the shirt to work with. Initially, I used pins to attach my pattern pieces to the shirt, but it was bunching up. It just wouldn't lay flat. So I'm like, you know what? I'm going to use tape instead because I need this as flat as possible so I make sure that I don't cut Aaliyah's face wrong. So now this is just me cutting out the middle piece of the corset. Now this part got a little bit tricky when I added the side parts of the front of the corset to the shirt. I say it got tricky because the pattern pieces don't align perfectly until you are ready to sew them together. And because those pieces don't align perfectly and I'm using them on top of a graphic, there's just going to be certain little pieces of that graphic that are not going to be cut out or they're going to be cut on. So that part was a little bit tricky for me, but I ended up making the best out of it and doing as the best as I could to make sure that I got the Aaliyah name in her face. And that was all that I needed for this corset. All right, my pieces are cut out, and now I'm about to put them together to see how bad I did on the cutting. I wasn't sure, but you can kind of see here how the word woman was kind of cut into, and then the E on the word more was kind of cut out a little bit, but it still works. You still get the gist of what it looks like, or what it's supposed to look like at least. Now this piece right here will be the side of the corset. You got to cut two of those pieces, and then this will be the very back of the corset. This is where you will actually have the part where you tie the corset together. So it's all coming along. I was so happy, and then I realized, wait a second, as I was reading the instructions, I don't have actual lining. So that's when I grabbed my TLC shirt and I was like, I want to do something with this shirt, because both of these shirts I was getting ready to throw away anyways. And I'm like, no, you can do something great with this. So go ahead and do it. Now what you see me doing here is taking those pieces of that Aaliyah shirt that I just cut out and putting it on top of the TLC shirt. And you'll see here that I had to cut off a little bit of Chili's face. I didn't want to, but like I mentioned earlier, these pieces don't align perfectly until you sew them together. So this is just me marking the inside and the outside of the shirt to make sure that I had the pieces facing correctly. And now I'm just cutting everything out, and pretty soon I'm about to put it all together. This pattern in particular does not call for interfacing, but because I wanted my corset to have a little bit of structure and for it to feel kind of thick, I went and got some interfacing from Walmart, and literally this was my first time using it. And what I'm doing is cutting out pieces of the interfacing for the middle of my corset and for the sides of it. I'm not adding any interfacing to the back pieces of this corset because I want to make sure those pieces have as much stretch as possible. I'm about to fuse this interface onto the Aaliyah part of the corset. So it's saying to put the rough side, which is this side is softer, against the wrong side of the fabric, which is this side. So I've put this together and then put a damp cloth over it, and then press it with an iron. So I'm about to do that right now. So the instructions say I need to put it on the wool steam setting. Oh, there it is, wool. Okay. Here's my towel. I normally use this towel when I'm dyeing my hair, so it's been through some things. But anyways, I'm now going to, I hope I do this right. It says to fuse the edges first. So let's see what happens. I don't know. Apparently I'm supposed to have pins on this, but I don't really feel like doing all that. I know this interface will like be sticking out from the fabric, but I'll just cut around that. All right, now I'm about to press this on here. Okay, so put that down and let's see what happens. All right, let's see if it worked. It did. I'm holding it by the interface and it is on there, so it worked. Good. So now my corset is going to have like a stiffer feel to it versus just the regular cotton feel. I need to press this area real quick. Now I'm going to press the interfacing to the sides of the corset as well. And once I get done with that, I'm going to put all my pieces together and start sewing. I swear the worst part of sewing is getting everything put together and prepped in order to sew. Like that takes so long, but it's all worth it when it's all said and done. And now I'm looking at the instructions again, just to see how everything is supposed to lay. And because I have a little bit of experience with sewing, I didn't read the instructions word for word. I pretty much just needed to have those pattern pieces to cut out and see how it's supposed to lay, and then I just went from there. I sewed the TLC pieces together first, and as you can see, part of Chili's face is gone, but you can still see how pretty her face is. That's all that matters, and that's what it looked like after I got that all sewed together. Now that I have the front part of the corset together, I'm attaching the side pieces. I'm using my clips to attach it, and I'm just sewing those pieces onto the front of the corset. And lastly, I attached the back pieces. If you happen to get this pattern, it literally tells you how you are supposed to sew this and what pieces to sew together. Now I have both my TLC and my Aaliyah corsets sewn together. Now I'm about to attach the two pieces to make it reversible. I achieved this by putting the right sides or the graphic sides together. And I'm only going to sew on the back sides of the fabric. So once I have those two pieces together, I'm going to sew along the top part of the corset and the sides of the corsets. And I'll leave the bottom pieces of the corset open. I won't sew those pieces together, and you'll see why later on in the video. But this is what it looked like after I sewed everything together. All right, so if you do this pattern, you'll see that the side at the bottom has like this tail. Now, I don't know if this was supposed to somehow attach there. It probably was, but what I'm gonna do is just cut it off because I'd rather it have the bottom part of this corset have like this type of cut. So you see here, I'm just gonna cut it. and I feel like it's gonna look right when it's all said and done. But yeah, I don't know why this was like that. I'm pretty sure I messed up somewhere in the cutting or sewing process, but I mean, I'm gonna fix it, hopefully. Now I'm getting ready to add boning to the corset. Boning gives the corset structure and makes the corset stand up on its own. Now, one thing that I did learn about boning is that the edges or the ends of boning is sharp and it can poke through your fabric. One way to prevent that from happening is by melting the edges of the boning with a lighter. You just got to be very careful when you do this so that it won't be so sharp and it can be like kind of dull and rounded off. Also, another tip that I learned with boning is because it usually is curved, is that you can press it down with an iron as long as you keep the iron on low and then you press a towel over it so it doesn't melt. It doesn't get completely flat, but it does take some of the curving out of the boning. Now, before I stick the boning into the corset, I'm going to do one more stitch with both of the right sides, meaning the graphic sides, pressed together. As you can see, I'm going to do a stitch at the bottom, and this is going to close up my corset. Now, when I do this stitch, I'm going to leave a small hole, as you can see, and through that hole, I will pull the right sides of the fabric out by pulling and flipping the fabric. And once I finish doing that, you'll still see a bit of fabric hanging where that hole is. Now it's time for me to create the small spaces for the boning. Now these spaces are only going to be as wide as the boning. Here's an example of what it will look like. The pattern tells you how wide that space is supposed to be. It'll give you that exact measurement, but I just did mine by sight. And then once I had my lines placed where they were supposed to be, I just stuck my boning into the corset, and I put in about 6 pieces of boning, which is what the pattern calls for. And this is what it's looking like. You can see how structured the corset is starting to become. So here's a picture of what the back of this corset looks like. I didn't want to do my back part that way. I figured it would be so much easier to do the back with eyelet tape, which is what you're seeing now. And these next videos will go into detail about how I attach the eyelet tape. Okay, so I have sewn the eyelet tape onto the corset, and I did it on the front and the back since this is reversible. I made sure that I sewed it the right side down. So this is the back side of the eyelet tape. You want to flip that over. And the way that you know it's the back is because, sorry that it keeps getting blurry, because this part sticks up. This little round part of the eyelet sticks up when it should be flat like that. And make sure when you add eyelet tape to your corset, if you do it that way, you want to make sure that you have the correct amount of eyelet holes on each side of your back pieces. Now that I've attached all my eyelet tape and I've added in all my boning, it's time to do a top stitch along the bottom part of the corset. I'm going to flip up the fabric at the bottom to make sure I close that hole up. And this is what the bottom of the corset looked like after I added that top stitch. Okay, now we're to the very end of this corset. I'm using a hand stitching punch to punch holes through the eyelets. That way I can put my lace through the holes when it's time to tie up the corset. So because I don't have actual ribbon or whatever they use to tie up corsets, I'm just going to use this black shoestrings. I have 2 of them. These are about 52 inches long, which is not as long as I need it. So I'm just going to cut off this part of the shoelace. Golly, if I could talk. And cut off this part and then combine the 2 so it can be as long as I need it. And this is pretty much me just making use of something that I already have. And I'll tie up the corset and show you what it looks like from there. All right, so I'm just gonna cut these 2 little pieces here. I think it'd be easier if I just connect these with tape first so it doesn't move when I'm trying to sew it. There, that's so much easier than to try to hold it in place or pin it. And then I'm just gonna sew maybe 2 lines on the edges, and actually 3. So 1 on the edge, 1 on this edge, and then 1 down the middle. Okay, now that I'm done with my lace or my shoestring, I'm gonna go ahead and lace up the corset, and then I'm gonna try it on for you so you can see what it looks like. Okay, so here is a quick glimpse of what it looks like off. And I'm just showing you how it looks reversible, the TLC side, the Aaliyah side, and this is what it looks like on. I was so happy with how it turned out. It was so cute. I'm so mad that it didn't fit me because I would have kept it, but it is fitting like a size medium. Actually, that's what size I ended up cutting out anyway. So I am gonna sell this. I have the corset listed on my eBay page if you're interested in purchasing it. The link to my eBay store is provided in the description. If you enjoyed this tutorial, please like, share, and subscribe, and I'll be back with more videos soon. Bye.